Hi everyone. Who thought we'd get here? Not me. Not me anyway. I absolutely didn't. For anyone in the English speaking world who has not heard, I was offered a place on a doctorate in clinical psychology training program starting in September 2021 on my sixth application. And some of you might have seen the not getting a DClinPsy place for the sixth time. I really, truly did not think I would get a place when I made that video. So, yeah, somehow we did. I don't quite know how that happened, but yeah. In this video, I'm going to cover kind of my journey to getting a place this year and some tips that I feel helped me this year. But I really want to caveat that with remember that this is just one voice in a sea of voices of people that did get places, that didn't get places. It's just one opinion. And ultimately, you know you the best. So when you're coming to doing your application, don't mimic what I've been doing and any tips that I give you necessarily. Do what's right for you. If those tips don't kind of sit well, then don't follow them. It's okay. Also, the other thing is I didn't start this account with the intention of documenting my career. That wasn't kind of my plan. There are lots of fantastic accounts that already do that. But I am going to add a little bit more stuff about my journey in because people seem to be really interested in it, which is great. And I'm very humbled by that and a little bit scared. But hopefully this is helpful for some people that might have applied multiple times or are thinking about applying. I really hope that it's somewhat helpful to you. Let's get into it. Starting with the pre-application. So this was, as I say, this was my sixth application and I was so done with doing the application. I didn't want to do it again. I really did not want to write a seventh one. This was, in my head, my last chance. And I think it's important that I don't discount that because I did definitely say to myself, right, you've got this chance. And if you don't get on, then you'll have to go and do something else. Go and train in therapy was what I was going to do. Maybe go and look at the counselling psychology doctorate. That was another thing that I was going to think about. Anyway, so I placed a lot of pressure on myself for this application unnecessarily, I think is probably the truth of it. But also a little bit of context. So as I say, I applied 5 times, but I've interviewed the 2 years before. So I interviewed in 2019 and I interviewed in 2020. And part of my feedback from 2020 was that I should start using reflective models and that what might help me better understand myself and my experiences, my beliefs, my biases, and how they all impact my practice. So the other thing to say is that I started as an assistant, my first assistant psychologist position in February 2020. And I had my interview in March 2020. So I hadn't really had a lot of time to develop as an AP or work with clinical psychologists before I kind of had that interview. So here are some of the things that really helped me when I was really thinking about how I wanted to do my application, what I wanted to say. And I did spend quite a lot of time researching lots of different things about doctorate applications. Something that really helped me was running a YouTube and Instagram account. It really helped build my confidence. And being able to go back and watch some of my own videos, which sounds really up myself, and I'm sorry if it does, but it's almost like I got a bit of distance from it and I was like, oh, actually, I kind of do know what I'm talking about sometimes. Because my imposter syndrome voice, which I have done a video on, so I'll insert it somewhere around here. Because of my imposter syndrome voice, I'd spent years telling myself that I didn't know anything, that was the reason that I wasn't getting any assistant posts, that because I wasn't good enough, I wasn't getting onto the doctorate, blah, blah, blah. But the live webinars and videos really helped me speak in front of people because it just it really terrifies me to speak in front of people. And it still does, even though I'm doing this right now. I'm basically just in my bedroom talking in front of a camera, so it's not quite the same. But what I would say is that it definitely helped me, and I knew that getting over the hurdle of the interview was something that I needed to work on because I had got interviews before but never got places. So I wanted to try and do something that helped me speak a little bit better in front of people. But that's something that helped me. And if you don't want to start an account, that's absolutely fine. You know, it's not a problem. But if you're like me and you struggle with confidence speaking in front of others and feel that it's a barrier to you, as it was for me, maybe I would consider seeking out opportunities to improve that, like giving presentations at work or leading meetings, things like that. I know it's terrifying, but it will help you speak in front of people, which means you'll find the interview a little bit easier if you get there. The second thing that really helped me pre-application was Surviving Clinical Psychology. I'm a massive advocate of this book. I think it's fantastic. It basically has 4 different kind of sections, and it talks to you about the selves in clinical psychology. And I think it's a book that I'll read on training. I think it's a book that I'll read again when I'm newly qualified, when I'm, hopefully a consultant. Like, I will read this for a long time, and it has lots of exercises in that really help. So for me, it really helped me identify my voice, my emotions, my feelings, what I really felt about things, my values. Thirdly, as I say, part of my feedback was about using reflective models. So I started a reflective portfolio, which is basically a folder full of reflections. I started using reflective models and kind of sat down and did a reflection. And actually devoting that time to it. I was really lucky in my AP role to have that. It really helped. And now I don't sit and do a reflection. I rarely do that now because I feel like I've developed those reflective skills, and I feel more confident in myself that kind of just sitting and taking 5 minutes to breathe and kind of think about things and go through a model in my head is just as helpful. And I do think I've articulated my experiences in a different way, having used reflective models. So start using those reflective models. This is my advice. And then what you'll find, I mean, what I did was think about all my experiences, compare the experiences that I had in different jobs, and I kind of found out, actually, I've worked with a lot of highly stigmatized groups within the already kind of misunderstood mental health population, and actually that's really important to me, and that's some work that I'd like to continue doing, because I think of all the kind of social justice issues that come alongside that and the social inequalities, it's really important to me. So that was something I could write about in my application, and that was based on a reflection. So do some reflection. That's definitely what I would do. The other thing pre-application that kind of came to my mind was, after 5 applications, maybe even after 1 or 2 or 3, but in my head 5 applications was kind of what I said to myself. I'd give myself 5 years and then I'll move on and do something else. Didn't do it. After 5 applications, I really started to consider whether I was good enough, because, doing something over and over again and expecting a different result when you're doing the same kind of thing is the definition of insanity. So I just imagined that it was me that was the problem, and I spent a lot of time thinking about myself and what I wanted to do in life, how clinical psychology could fit into that, some different routes into it, as I kind of already said. But once I'd done that and I decided, no, I really do want to be a clinical psychologist. I want to be doing the work that they do. I've always been jealous of clinical psychologists whenever I work with them, because I really want to be doing their job. I actually felt far more devoted to the application and ready to start the application. And I think without that pre-application kind of work, I don't think my application would have been as strong. So let's talk about the application. This year, as I said, I was determined for this to be my last year of applications and interviews. So to this end, I watched loads and loads of videos and live streams I could, as I could, about the applications. Shout out to all of these fantastic accounts and people that are doing stuff. The Oxford Psych, Dr. Marion Trent at Good Thinking Psychological Services, the Worry People. Loads of hugely helpful videos are out there about stuff, which I'll link down in the description below as well. How I started my application, and this kind of, I can't remember if this came from advice from someone or whether I kind of just thought this might be a right way to go about it. It was definitely a different method than I've done in previous years, but I wrote myself 3 lists. Number 1, why I wanted to be a clinical psychologist at those specific courses, why I wanted to train at those specific courses. Number 2 was my biggest lessons. Comparing different clinical populations that I'd worked with, applying advice from supervision, what imposter syndrome meant to me and my journey with that. And number 3 was what competencies I felt I had developed and the experiences to demonstrate that, and how they linked to training. So I wrote these lists, and it just seems like a lot of information, but even before I started kind of writing the application, I wanted to be really clear about why I was applying to those courses, to make sure that that information was in there, to make sure that actually I was being reflective enough, and that I was including information that was really important to me and my journey. And so, as I say, like, working with stigmatized groups and groups that suffer from lots of different inequalities is massively important to me. So I kind of wrote about that and linked that to my commitment to the NHS, how, you know, it's free access to healthcare for everybody, regardless of where you're from, what you look like, you know, or how much money you have. So those were all things that came from these lists, basically. And when I was going through the application and I was kind of writing it to get a sense of like a narrative that kind of went through the story, I could then tick things off my lists. So I could, you know, it's not, and for me, it wasn't possible to put all of those things on my list into the application. There was a lot, and the word count is small. You know, you don't get a lot of space to do that. So I ticked off the things that were kind of the most important things to me that felt right to be in the application. But then I had a lists, and I could see what was in the application really clearly. So definitely have a go at doing that. And I also, for the first time ever, I asked lots of people to read through my application. I asked my supervisor, who's a clinical psychologist, and it was the first time I actually had a real life clinical psychologist look through my form. And she gave me some really helpful comments about what it was that I really wanted to say, and helped my authentic voice kind of come out, my authentic professional voice as she knew it and as I knew it, and just kind of asking those questions, that curiosity about, well, what are you trying to say here? Let's try and make that better, because I know what your point is, but you're not making it. It's not very clear. So that was massively helpful. And I know that not everyone has a supervisor who's a psychologist, but if you can reach out to some, you know, anyone, there will probably be a psychologist somewhere in your health board or your trust or your service. See if they don't mind reading through it. Also, I asked for trainees on the course I was applying to look through. And I'm so grateful to the ones that did, because God, thank you. If you're watching, thank you so much, because really, your comments were invaluable. It was so helpful. And then I also asked my friends and family, non-psychology people and psychology people alike, because I really wanted to make sure that who I was coming through. I really wanted to make sure that, you know, the people that my friends and family knew, the person that I am, was really on that form. The only thing I would say about asking people to look through your form is, remember, it's yours. It's your application form. And that's why I think doing the pre-application work and really knowing what you want to say is massively important. Because then you will be able to keep your authentic voice. You can tick the things off your list. And if someone suggests, actually, why don't you talk about this, and it doesn't quite fit with what you want to say, you don't have to take that advice. You know, you make sure that it's your form and that your voice comes through. So another thing to kind of caveat was that the personal statements that I wrote went through so many drafts, like so many versions. In my experience, when I write reports or whatever, if I'm writing it and then I take a few days away from it and come back to it with fresh eyes, it makes such a difference. So I started doing the application quite early, like late August. And the deadline's kind of October, November, because I knew that I wanted to have plenty of time to do the drafting. It might not be good for everyone. Some people might be able to just sit and write it and only go through it once more and make some minor changes. And that's great. So let's talk about the application outcomes. So for the clinical doctorate in the UK, you apply through Clearinghouse generally. There are courses that you can apply directly to as well. I think some in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, you can apply to directly. So I applied through Clearinghouse. I applied to 4 courses. And I was rejected for 2 of the courses, so that's 50% of the courses, straight away from the application. They didn't like my application. Or maybe they just had too many people. I don't know. I was invited for interview for 1 of the courses, and I was a reserve list for interview for another. Although I did end up having 2 interviews this year, so that reserve did actually end up being an interview. So I want to talk a little bit about the interviews, because they are a massive step in getting a place, and one that I found very scary and daunting. And after my interview last year, I just thought, I am never going to get through this interview stage. I don't know how to do it. It's really hard. So my first interview, they also ran a kind of clinical video task, and that, I think, helped relieve some pressure, because it wasn't all just on the interview. You had another chance to kind of show the skills that you have through this sort of video task. The interviews were then the following week, and the interview lasted for, I think it was about 45 minutes. And it was just one interview. I obviously can't share the questions, but I think they were fair questions. I don't think you could have prepared for them massively. You know, you couldn't have predicted what the questions would be, but I think they are really well designed to make you really think and think on the spot. But the outcome for that one was a reserve for the offer. But that course didn't tell you if you were in the top 10 of the reserves, because they rank the reserve list. Then you got your position, so you knew whether you were number 1, number 10, whatever. If you weren't in the top 10, you didn't know your position. So in my head, I was number 36 because I didn't know what number I was. Yeah, I just went straight to worst case scenario. Anyway, so while kind of dealing with all of that uncertainty, I did manage to get off of the reserve list for another interview, another course, which was one interview, 5 questions, half an hour. Very scary. No other sort of task. I was probably just quite unnerved that I only had 5 answers, totaling 25 minutes for them to make a decision about whether I was going to be a good trainee or not. And I think that I found that quite stressful. And I felt, yeah, I was under a huge amount of pressure because in my head, I wasn't going to get off the reserve list for the offer. So in my head, you know, I put a lot of pressure on myself again by saying, this is my last opportunity this year. These 5 answers have to be perfect because there is no margin for error. You have to be absolutely incredible because everybody is brilliant. Not the most helpful way of going into an interview, I'll tell you that for free. And the outcome was a rejection. And when I had my feedback, it was quite frustrating because I had fantastic feedback and they basically said that I'd make a really good trainee, which is great. And that's obviously what you want to hear, but you want that also to be backed up by a place. I was expecting it because I did find that interview quite difficult. So anyway, I felt as if my DClinPsy 2021 dreams were completely over and I kind of planned to move on with my life a little bit. Fast forward to the end of May. So I found out about the reserve offer on the 1st of April. End of May. So this is kind of 8 weeks afterwards. I got an email saying I was at position 10 on the reserve list. And my brain was going, oh my God, it could happen. And then because in my head, I'd closed that door. And what this did is let in a little sliver of light. So I was going, oh my God, I could get a place this year. And then you are on the roller coaster again. And then I thought, it won't move that much. Like, who is going to decline that course? You know, 10 people. I need 10 people not to accept their places. Or to accept places at other, you know, I just didn't think it was going to happen. Anyway, so I got a couple more emails moving me up the list. I got number 8, then number 5, and then I got number 3, and then I got number 2, and then I got to number 1. And this was 2 days before the deadline of acceptance of places. So 2 days before, and I was position 1 on the waiting list. I still refuse to allow myself to believe it though. I've built myself up way too many times and hit rock bottom way too many times. Maybe that's a bit dramatic. I just wouldn't allow myself. So I get a call, no caller ID. I'm absolutely shaking. And I was offered a place. Absolutely insane. I cried a cry that I've never cried before as well. Like I just can't explain it. I've never made those noises or been that way anyway. Through my apologies, you know, for crying and disbelief and my shaking, I couldn't believe that this is real. I've got to a point now, because it's a few weeks later, that, okay, this is actually happening now. I feel, yeah, it's kind of settled in a bit. It still feels insane. And the course that I, you know, was offered a place on, it was a complete pipe dream. I never, ever thought I'd get offered an interview there, let alone a place. Like it's very difficult. I was told at school that I would never be good enough to get into this university, and here I am. Screw them. Screw whatever anyone tells you not to go for it. Absolutely do it. Believe in yourself. That's what I would say. But during this time, it really was an emotional roller coaster, and I think I kind of skipped over the reserve list and moving up the list. It was difficult, I have to say, because every time you move, you just imagine not getting on. And it's almost like dangling something in front of your face. But I also don't think there's a fairer way that they can do it. And I'm really glad that they do tell you what your position is, because some courses don't. And that's more stressful. Having had both, having not been told what my position was, I immediately went worst case scenario. I think knowing what your position is helpful. I mean, I'm almost ashamed to say it as well, but I did feel validated. There was a big part of me that was like, yeah, I really thought this year was going to be the year, and I really thought I was good enough this year. That's not to say that if you don't get onto the DClin, you're not good enough. That's absolutely not my message. It's the system. It's always the system. There's way too many of us trying to get in, and loads of fantastic candidates have to get rejected. That's just how it is, and it's horrible, I know. But there is definitely a part of me that felt validated and felt like, yes, finally done it. I think it was that sense of achievement. Still can't actually say. I mean, I've only just said it about 2 times that I'm going to be a trainee clinical psychologist without like laughing or stopping myself, because it seems so insane. It really does. My key messages from today is that you can do it. You can do it. It can happen. And I know it's frustrating. Believe me, I know. If you haven't, do watch my not getting a DClin place for the 6th time, because I really went through it in that video. The second thing is, please try to externalize that lack of success. It's the system, not you. I know that's really hard, but it's how I managed to get through the kind of rejection this year. And I think rather than internalizing, thinking that you're the problem, it truly is the system. Just look at the numbers. Like, for the course that I'm on, I think 660 applied for 36 places. It's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. And I think for the other course that I interviewed at, there were, I think it was over 700, and they had 24 places. There aren't just 24 really good candidates. There will be hundreds of really good candidates. It really is the system, and it stinks. And I know. But please try to just externalize that, not thinking that it's you, because it doesn't help. And thirdly, this video, I really hope it doesn't come across as braggy, but I just wanted to show you what my journey was this year to getting a place somehow, and hopefully give a few tips that might help. Anyway, I am also going to do a follow-up to this video that is a question and answer from the lovely followers on Instagram. So watch this space. And thank you all so much for your fantastic vibes, because I really, truly believe that was helpful in me getting my place. Thank you so much. And I will see you next time.